My name is Gavin Northey from the Department of Marketing. I'm also a card-carrying, paid-up member of GIFT as well. But today we're going to be talking about the Sea Jellies Illuminated research that we've done. So a little bit of background for anyone that doesn't know. Back in 2018, Griffith University and SeaWorld partnered up and created Sea Jellies Illuminated, basically to be a sort of a space where people can come and find out about sea jellies and understand sea jellies and their broader place in the sort of the marine environment. So despite being in sort of place for about 5 years though, little if any research has actually been done to look at the effectiveness or the success of the exhibit. So a group of us sat down and said maybe we should come up with some research questions and go out and actually test whether or not the exhibit is achieving the aims that was set out by the university and SeaWorld. The interesting thing though is that jellyfish are typically seen as a complete threat to humans. And I'm assuming that most people here that have lived in Queensland or have travelled to far north Queensland have seen signs like that, right? So there's a lot of research that says anything up to around about 150 million people around the world every year are stung by sea jellies. So you can understand that there's a real sort of trepidation from humans to want to interact with sea jellies or get close to them. However, sea jellies, there's a really sort of long history over hundreds of years that there's a lot of cultures that actually really revere sea jellies. And the reason that people revere them is because they do have this ethereal, magical sort of beauty. I mean, I'm sure everyone is here, they may look scary, but they are quite pretty, particularly when you illuminate them like that with some neon lights. So because of that, about 30 years ago, some marine parks and aquariums around the world started introducing sea jelly exhibits, not just to increase the patronage to their location, but to also be a new source of revenue. So in 2018, again, like I said, Griffith and SeaWorld partnered up and created the Sea Jellies Illuminated that you can see there. Now, we had a different sort of approach in that it wasn't really there as a revenue generating facility. It was really more about creating something that was entertaining in the theme park, but would also serve as a research hub for sea jelly research in the South Pacific. So that people could actually come and view the sea jellies, they could check them out up close and not just have an entertaining experience, but also have an education about sea jellies and again, their place in that broader marine ecosystem. But again, very limited amounts of research has been undertaken. And so what we wanted to do is go out and understand what was it about the consumers that they found appealing about the Sea Jellies exhibit, because if we could do that, we could then say, well, it probably is or isn't achieving the objectives that were set out. And if we could recognise any kind of discrepancies, we could then recommend some potential changes that would create a more optimal visitor experience. So a group of us from GIFT, from both marketing, tourism, we had Kylie, who is part of science, and she does the in-water research. We came up with the research questions. Basically, we wanted to understand what the visitors thought of the exhibit. We also wanted to know whether or not the exhibit was having an educational sort of influence on people, and also whether it was changing people's attitudes about jellyfish generally. So we designed a within subjects field study with pre and post measures. So as you can see there's the exhibit. Before people went in, we would survey them and we would ask them a whole range of questions. And then when they're exiting, we would get a sort of a post-experience sort of feedback as well. Here's some of the measures that we use. So as well as like all of the standard demographics, we had pre and post attitudinal measures. The big ones that I've highlighted there in blue is that we also wanted to understand the emotional responses that people have when they're actually in the exhibit. And then from a marketing standpoint, where some of the researchers came from, we thought we also want to understand people's intention to word of mouth. You know, how likely were they to come out and start singing from the rooftops about the exhibit and about SeaWorld generally? And we use that as the sort of the key marketing metric. So we went and collected data. It took us 2 days. It was actually a nice couple of days, believe it or not, busy. We ended up getting 318 usable responses. The average age was around about 35, and it was the last 2 days before, what do you call them, school holidays started. So it's the sample actually skewed a little bit female, which was probably to be expected given the timing. So the results, I know that you're all hanging here waiting for the results. The best thing was that we actually wanted to find out whether coming into the exhibit actually made people more appreciative of science generally. And what we found was that there was a statistically significant increase in the visitors' experience or the visitors' attitudes towards science once they came out of the exhibit. So that was a really positive result. We also found that people were really much more appreciative of research at SeaWorld generally. And it was interesting being there on location at the time, because we did get some feedback from people that they came into SeaWorld thinking that there was potentially some negative connotations about the research at SeaWorld. But once they saw what was happening at the Sea Jellies Illuminated, we were lucky because on the 2 days we actually had people in the lab upstairs, if anyone has been there, so people could see them in the lab, and it made them really much more appreciative of the SeaWorld research generally. But the big one was that it made people much more appreciative of jellyfish. Generally speaking, people were probably not too scared of jellyfish. Anxiety was not changed. Okay, so we thought this was a bit unique because we expected people to come out going, "Oh, I'm totally not scared of sea jellies." What we actually found was that they went in completely not scared of sea jellies, which we thought was unique given that 80% of our respondents were actually Queensland residents. So clearly Queenslanders don't care much about sea jellies, but that's a different piece of research, right? So then we also looked at the 4 E's of the tourism experience. Entertainment being the first one. What we found was that people came out of the exhibit feeling like they had had a really entertaining experience. They also found that being in the exhibit was a really easy way to escape from reality, I guess. So it was a high level of escapism once that they had experienced in the exhibit itself. And you all saw what the sea jellies look like when they're illuminated. It is a really impressive location, and you know it was to be expected. But people came out of there saying it is visually stunning, and it really is. So you can understand why over the years everyone has, or you know, all the cultures have really looked at that sort of ethereal beauty of the sea jellies, and they find it really aesthetically pleasing. And this was an interesting one. We actually found that education, or the expected educational experience, didn't really change much. Now, at first we were kind of surprised, and we thought, is it reaching the level that we need in terms of being an educational experience? Actually, what we realised is that people are coming in with quite a high expectation for being educated in the exhibit, and it's not going down. So it's actually meeting their expectations, which when you look at it like that is really quite a sort of I guess a positive outcome, you know, in that when you look at these together, ultimately the exhibit is really achieving the objectives that would have been set by the university and SeaWorld together. So what we do is when we actually put all of that together and we ran the whole thing as one conceptual model, what we realize is that if we get the visitors to come in and they have a really entertaining experience, they also have a really positive emotional experience, and that allows them to, I guess, maybe free up their mind to change the attitudes about the things that may or may not, really matter to them in the first place. In this situation, it changed their attitudes about SeaWorld, it changed their attitudes about science, about the exhibit, and about jellyfish. So there was a lot of positive attitudinal change that came about from the entertainment and the positive emotions that had been elicited. And because of that, from a marketing perspective, there was all of this downstream sort of willingness to go out and talk about the destination and the exhibit to other people, which is, from a marketing perspective, really what you want. So where does that leave us? In between now and Christmas, actually, a whole group of us are going to be back at SeaWorld, and we're actually going to have, go back one, or have you got, there we go. A whole group of us are going to be back at SeaWorld, and we're going to be having people walking around with eye tracking glasses, because what we want to do now is have that objective data, as some of the people here saw in the lab previously. What are people actually looking at? What is it that they're paying attention to that's actually creating all of those positive emotional responses? That's where we're going. Also, does SeaWorld want people to specifically look at any signage or exhibits? And if that's not occurring, what are the recommendations that we need to put in place to actually make those things key pieces of information?